Today, I was asked to talk a little bit about what's going to happen on Hayden Lake in 2021 for noxious weed treatments on the lake. As Marianne alluded to, there's quite the history with Hayden Lake and with those noxious weed treatments that occur. So the first thing I wanted to go over was just a quick recap of what happened in 2020, because that helps to set us up for what's coming in 2021. So the first thing that happened last year in May 19th of 2020 was the second Hayden Lake spring treatment, but with the first treatment utilizing the Gallium SC or panoxylum herbicide to control that curlyleaf pondweed, because the year previous to that, we had utilized fluoridone. So this is about a 269 acre area that was treated and trying to combat the presence of the curlyleaf pondweed in that north arm. And this was that polygon that was treated, basically McLean's Bay, all the way north, all the way up into the Sportsman's area on that far northern arm reach of the lake. So this was again done on May 19th of 2020. And then we also had some treatments that occurred later in the summer that occurred for both mechanical and chemical treatments last year. These happened in August and all the way into September for the diver projects that we had that occurred. The treatment areas in 2020 were all utilizing the herbicide Procellacor to treat the present growing Eurasian watermilfoil that was present during our survey that was conducted in July. We did find some lower density areas near or adjacent to previous treatment areas of Procellacor from 2019. We did assign both a expanded diver contract as well as the areas that were prescribed for the Procellacor treatments last year. This is where those treatments did occur, where we found a high enough density to treat in 2020 for the chemicals. And then here is a look at where the diver operations occurred in 2020. Our chemical applicator was Clean Lakes, and then our dive contract was Aquatic Weed Solutions. Those will be our same contractors again in 2021. And then in the fall of 2020, we also repeated the fall Turion study, in which we were trying to assess how our job's doing, how is the treatments working for curlyleaf pondweed specifically, and looking at the seed bank potential of the curlyleaf pondweed in the north arm of the lake. This has been something that we've been kind of monitoring because we've been wanting to make sure that our treatments are being successful and that we're utilizing the best practices possible to start reducing the amount of curlyleaf pondweed present in that north arm. What that looked like is we repeated the same grid of these Turion sample locations where we send down the ponar dredge that you can see on the left-hand side of your screen there. That's Nick Zerflew holding that little ponar dredge that we send down. It takes a very small scoop of the benthic sediments and brings it up, and then we could still sift through it to look and find any Turions present. That kind of gives us an assessment of what could potentially be across the bottom of that north arm. And then these are the same survey points that we took in 2019 and we also took in 2020. And this is just kind of a side-by-side grab of what we saw. Now, when we look at the numbers from 2019, the average grab of 2.1, and then going to an average grab of 5.9 in 2020, there was a pretty big jump in the presence of Turion average. And we're trying to figure out what may have caused that. Some of the things that we did notice kind of anecdotally when we were on site is the size of the Turions in 2020 were a lot smaller. They weren't quite as big and robust as we were seeing in 2019. And it was a very kind of just interesting, but we did see areas that had a lot higher counts of these smaller Turions that were, as you can see here in this picture here, where you can see this was from our largest grab, from a single grab into 2020, where you can see they're very, very small Turions. They weren't the full mature, they were mature, but they're very small. That's kind of what we were thinking. We did put together a series of heat maps to kind of show what that change is looking like over time from 2019 to 2020. And kind of our basic assessment, just kind of based on the data that we're seeing, is we're kind of seeing this draw of our higher Turion areas kind of being drawn up towards that farther northern arm of the Sportsman's Access area. I forget what that back bay is called on the upper right of those maps. but that is where we're seeing the highest density of these turions. So we're going to be kind of continuing this as we go forward, because I think last year we had a very successful year in keeping the curlyleaf pondweed from reaching the top of the water. It did a great job of keeping that curlyleaf pondweed. It controlled it very well during its peak growing season. And so we're looking forward to repeat this again for 2021, and hopefully be able to kind of really see those results as we get a third year into this repetitive study. All right, so let's go ahead, and I'm going to shift gears here and go into what's coming for 2021, what the plans and what things are going to look like so far. So when we start talking about the curlyleaf pondweed treatment, which is the one that's going to be knocking on our door here very quickly. So what we can see is that, you know, the contractor is, again, it's going to be Clean Lakes. They're on a 5-year contract, or a 1-year contract with 5 years of renewal available to them. This will be their second renewal. So they'll continue to be our contractor for this year. We are going to plan to treat that same 269-acre polygon that we treated in 2020. Will be the same polygon that we're going to be treating in 2021. The herbicide that we're going to use, it will again be this Gallion SC, or the panoxylum herbicide. We plan to have water rights notices being sent out from ISDA the week of April 26th, 2021. So again, it's just my chance to plug that little reminder. If you haven't updated your water rights mailing address with the Idaho Department of Water Resources, who houses all of the water right information, please do so. So we can make sure that you get your notice on time in a timely manner. And this is for the water rights that are the water rights from Hayden Lake. If you're drawing water rights from an outside source or outside well, outside of Hayden Lake, those won't be included on that. We currently have the plan with the contractor to have treatments occur the week of May 17th. We are holding that as kind of a weather dependent time frame. We haven't given an exact date because we really want to watch those dates and what the weather's doing, so we don't catch a high wind event or something like that. We will be using the Gallion again, and then with that treatment again occurring that week of May 17th. We're going to be watching the weather, watching kind of what's going on to really plan that date at the right time, so we don't have a high wind event like we had happen right after our treatment last year. So here is the look at what the treatment polygon is going to be for 2021. And the notification zone that we will be sending those water rights notices out to. So again, this is that bottom end of McLean's Bay and heading north into cover that treatment area of where we have the highest presence of curlyleaf pondweed last year. And again, it's projected to be again in the same area this year. Now, the reason that we're doing this treatment is I just wanted to bring this slide up. I showed this slide last year, but I think this is just a pivotal slide that helps to reinforce why we're doing our treatments in the spring, why we are targeting this growth period of the plants to make sure that we are getting the most efficient treatment that we possibly can out of this. This is just a general life cycle of curlyleaf pondweed, where in the fall is when it germinates, and it will hold over as a small germinated plant throughout the winter. And then additional germination will occur, as well as main plant growth will occur in the spring, with turion generation, or those reproductive parts of the plant, occurring in early summer to late spring. And then those will drop off, and the plants will then desiccate over time. And then that cycle will start all over again in the fall. Now, in my drawing here, you can see all those dots that are in the benthic soil representation there, of being the seed bank, if you will, of all of those turions present in the sediment of Hayden Lake, with the intention that as we can continue to drop or continue these treatments, we will be reducing the amount of available viable turions in the sediment of Hayden Lake, bringing that down to a much more controlled year. This is the third year of treatment for Hayden Lake, so we're really hoping to be drastically reducing the number of big viable turions throughout the lake, and showcasing that what we've been doing is working for us and keeping that curlyleaf pondweed from being such a detriment for boaters and travelers. Some quick information on the label of the Gallion herbicide that we'll be using. First and foremost, on the excerpt that is on the right hand or middle right hand side, about midway down, There is no restrictions on consumption of treated water for potable use or by livestock, pets, or other animals. So there's not any drinking water restrictions with this herbicide, which is a big plus for Hayden Lake. There's also no restrictions for the use of the treated water for recreational purposes, which includes swimming and fishing and things of that nature. So that's right. This is currently kind of this is what is off the label. So we know that there's no restrictions for those activities to continue to occur while the treatment is taking place. Looks like I got a couple questions here coming from the chat. First from Steve Meyer is what is success on curlyleaf in 5 years? Are you hoping to eradicate it in the North Arm? Eradication is a very strong word, Steve. And the way that I would best say is we want to bring this plant under control to where it's not being such a problem in the North Arm where it's heavily infesting that area. We don't anticipate that we're ever going to be able to fully eradicate it from the system of Hayden Lake. We do expect it to have some presence. What we want to do is keep that economic impact of boaters not being able to access the waterways due to this presence of this noxious weed, emergency services such as that, and we want to keep those numbers down. So that was what success would be to us, is getting those numbers back down to a controllable level where they're not as they don't have as high of a presence. Another question from Gary Leva. Is the goal to keep the weed from breaching the surface to eventually eradicate it entirely? I've also noticed weeds closer to the shores in the north area. Are these areas treated or just the main channel? That's a great question, Gary. When we're treating this, the applicator is actually making that application to the entire water body with a goal of hitting a specific parts per billion rate throughout the treatment area. We are targeting this entire area of the North Arm. We've broken it up. When we give it to the contractor, we actually break it up into 3 different applications rate. We have a nearshore application rate. We have kind of a mid-range, and then as we get to the deeper water on the southern end, as we move into McLean's Bay, we have an additional rate there as well. Because we want to make sure we hit that, again, that target parts per billion rate for this application. Yes, there's other weed plants that are present in there, both that are native species, and there's some of those native species that aren't going to be affected by this herbicide and this treatment. And as you get fragmentation of these native plants, you're going to see them a lot more in that shoreline area and that rackline area where you have those waves rolling in. You're going to see some of those broken fragments in those areas pretty commonly. I have a question from John Rubert. Would you drink from the lake? Have you tested carbon and alkalinity changes? So when I look at Hayden Lake, I'm giving the information that's based on the label. That is, comes from the label as to the testing that's been done by EPA. That is the recommendation from EPA, and we follow that with our pesticide general permit that we follow, as well as following all of those label guidances. When they say that it is safe for potable use, that is the label direction that we follow. For Jan Wilkins, are you satisfied with the Eurasian Watermilfoil treatment that took place throughout the lake 2 years ago? I'm going to get to milfoil here in just a minute, and we'll go over that. And then from Gil, how long does it take for a turion embedded in the lake bottom to become unviable? That is a great question, Gil. It's one that we are trying to find out as we go along. We've seen and done some studies with those turions that we collected, and being able to say that we've been able to tell what's a viable versus non-viable turion just based on a very, very easy squish test. If the turion is squishy, when you go to squeeze that pine cone-like structure, it's not a viable turion. If it's still very rigid and hard, that is a viable turion. I don't know as far as the time frame on those turions of how long they remain in the water, in the sediments, and can still remain viable, kind of like a seed germination rate. I don't know the answer to that question, but thank you. That's a great question to ask.
But Jeremy, it can be years, right?
It can be years, but I can't give you a confirmed document study that says this is how long it is, and so I'm gonna have to say I don't know. Thank you for those questions coming in. Those are great questions. I really appreciate those. So let's talk about the rest of the lake. When we talk about the rest of the lake, the main weed that we're really combating in Hayden Lake is Eurasian Watermilfoil and its hybrids that are present in the lake. I know those have caused a lot of issues over the years. We've been continually trying to up our treatment efforts on the Eurasian Watermilfoil and Hayden Lake, and I think we're having a good success. So let's talk about the North Arm. We did notice when we treated in 2019 with the fluoridone herbicide on the northern arm, we did not get any recruitment of Eurasian water milfoil that same year of treatment with fluoridone. There was a much longer treatment window that extended over those 3 different treatments that we did in 2019 that we feel that effectively controlled the Eurasian water milfoil in the north arm. In late 2020, as we were getting ready to do our fall surveys, we did notice recruitment of Eurasian water milfoil in that north arm. At first, it was very spotty, where it was just little spot indentations. If you remember on the map that I showed with the divers, there was the diver product areas that were kind of creeping up into that north arm, where we were seeing some recurrence of Eurasian water milfoil in those treatment areas from the fluoridone. And as we kind of assessed it when we were doing our fall turions survey, we did see some additional regrowth of that Eurasian water milfoil. We anticipate that we will see that same pattern again this year, because any Eurasian water milfoil that's growing or is alive during the time of the galleon treatment in the spring, which will be very, very minimal. If you remember, Eurasian water milfoil really likes that warmer season as you start going into June, July to really start growing. So the likelihood of there being a lot of Eurasian water milfoil present to be affected by the galleon treatment is going to be very low. So what we are planning on doing is when we come back to do our Eurasian water milfoil survey, we will be surveying the entire littoral zone of Hayden Lake and resurveying that northern arm to see the presence of Eurasian water milfoil and then responding in kind. What this may mean is a larger treatment area for Eurasian water milfoil in that north arm again, but we are looking at utilizing the Procellacor herbicide. Now, when I say the full littoral zone survey, that means the entire growing area where light can penetrate from the water surface all the way down to those benthic soils to support life based on the clarity of the water. When we are looking at the Hayden Lake as a whole, that's obviously the whole of the north arm down to McLean's Bay, and then you kind of have a very narrow band as you start to go around the rest of the lake. And there's a few bays, Mawkins or Rourke, where you have a little bit more of an area of growth or potential for those plants in those areas. So we'll really be paying attention to those areas. Now, the one thing to keep in mind, we have had very, very good success with the Procellacor herbicide that we've used over the last 2 years. In this map, I wanted to show you where all of those treatment areas have occurred between 2019 and 2020. Now, the reason I bring this up is on the Procellacor label itself, they're being very, very good stewards of their product and of the waterways that are being treated, in that they have a statement in there that refers to resistance management. When it comes to any weed treatment, we always want to be very, very cautious about if we keep using the same herbicide year after year after year after year, there is a higher probability of plants in general developing resistance to a herbicide. So with this product, there's right in the label, we can only use it for 2 years in a row on the same area. Thankfully, all of our treatment areas have only been used in those areas once. Even though they're on the map showing here, this is where the treatment areas have occurred with Procellacor across the lake. We haven't seen, we can go into all of these areas again this year and still treat should there be any presence of Eurasian water milfoil, because they all have only had one treatment with the Procellacor herbicide. So that is again going to be our herbicide of choice this year. And that is because mainly due to the fact that it is a systemic herbicide. It does not have a drinking water restriction with this herbicide. There is a irrigation restriction that's very similar to the Galleon and Procellacor herbicides are very, very similar in that you can continue to water grass, but you can't water gardens, crops, trees, things of that nature. They want you to wait until it gets below 1 part per billion. We'll be conducting post-treatment tests, what are called fast tests by the manufacturer of the herbicide to assess the part per billion level of that herbicide in the water column. And so we can then release those irrigation permissions for non-turf irrigation. Now, where this will all come into play for you guys is that when it comes to all of the bays that we'll be doing treatments on, we're going to try something again, very similar to last year, where you can come to ISDA's website and go to our 2021 treatment planner or aquatic treatment planner webpage. That will be available. It is going through a remake right now, and will be available shortly. So that way everybody can go on there, see the latest up-to-date treatment information, as well as the contractor's information, as well as the surveys that we've conducted. There's going to be a new look to all of that. It's just, it wasn't quite ready yet to be launched before I came to this meeting this evening, but it will be coming very, very soon. With that, I will answer any questions if there's any remaining questions. From John Rubrick, says, have you tested alkalinity or carbon changes? We have not done that testing ourselves. I know that DEQ monitors the water quality throughout Hayden. I know some of the Hayden watershed individuals are very involved with that process, and I would point that question towards them. I had one additional question to talk a little bit about O'Rourke Bay. We have been in O'Rourke Bay for some treatments in the previous years. We didn't see a lot of Eurasian watermilfoil growth in there for the last couple of years. There is some good native growth in those areas, but it is one we want to continue to watch, because like Mawkins and like the North Arm, it does have a little bit bigger area of littoral growth potential area for plants to be in there. And it'll be one of those areas that we continue to monitor for Eurasian watermilfoil as we go forward.